Now we do.
Okay. The time is 12:01. We will call this meeting of the Findlay City Council Planning and Zoning Committee meeting to order. I am the chairman, Brian Bauman, from the 5th Ward, and I will let the other members introduce themselves.
Dennis Selman, City Councilman from Ward 2.
Grant Russell, Council at Large.
Dan DeArmond, City Council Ward 4.
Okay, so we will get right into the agenda here. We will go down to item number 2 to begin with cannabis dispensary zoning. We'll begin the discussions there.
So just an update. I have, we've worked through the maps, feel good about that. And I've been working on the language, and I have submitted that for review to the law director office. So we will be moving forward with that in January. We pulled up the addresses for all the properties within the proposed district and within 500 feet, and it's about 600 addresses. It's actually less than I thought it would be. So we will be sending out a card letting them know that's on Planning Commission in January, and we will have in order to convey information to that many people, we will have a QR code on the postcard, and we will have, and that will lead them to a page on the website with frequently asked questions and PDFs of the proposed maps. And then also, when someone goes to the city webpage, there will be kind of, I think on the banner, there will be proposed cannabis zoning. So that people can, so a large amount of people can have access and get information without having to call us many, many times.
Mr. Russell.
I, for one, will say I'm disappointed this isn't, that we're not voting to recommend at this meeting. The timing for next month doesn't work. Our first meeting is Tuesday, January 7th, so the earliest we could refer this to city planning and planning and zoning would be at the Tuesday, January 7th meeting, and that means that they have, you immediately put it on the agenda, and then on the 9th, city planning then considers it. I mean, do they? Is that enough time? Are we going to preemptively send the maps and the draft language before City Council approves or doesn't approve it to the members of City Planning Commission so that they can give it proper consideration? I think our timing is wrong. I think right now we're now into February's City Planning Commission schedule, and same. So we're now at February 13th. So I don't see January consideration of this by anybody other than full city council. 2
thoughts. I could add a letter and the district maps as an add-on to. Is there the planning city council's this coming Tuesday? I could do that. I could have a. Or it might not even have to be an add-on if I get it to Denise today. My other thought was in the past we have done that, but the on Tuesday refer it to Planning Commission and it's already on the agenda. So in the past we've done that, but maybe this is a little more high profile and we don't want to.
But we can't put it on their agenda until full council gets this committee's recommendation on what to do, and it sounds like we're not. This committee is not in a position today to make a recommendation to the full council,
okay,
unless chairman, we are in a position to do so.
I misunderstood. I thought at the last meeting you had done that. I had my marching orders to come up with the ordinance, and I was going under the assumption I was creating the ordinance and taking it to city council. That's how I left last meeting, that you guys were done reviewing it. Because then on January
We were done, you were gonna nitpick it. Remember, you were gonna look at some nitpicks, some properties and just make
Yeah.
sure, you were gonna go through that again.
So on January 9th, the ordinance will come before you for your official review. So January 9th, it would go to City Planning Commission at 9 a.m. And then at noon, it would come before Planning and Zoning Committee for its official review. That's what I was, that's, if I misunderstood, I apologize.
Let's walk through this again. So, we make a recommendation to city council, and then city council has to vote. Does it have to go through 3 readings with city council or anything? No. So we just make a recommendation to council, and then what? And then,
We make a recommendation on the path to take on this to city council.
Oh, and then they defer it
And the
too.
full council then either accepts our committee report, i.e. our recommendation, or does not accept our committee report. And then after that, after they do, let's just assume that they accept our recommendation, and then legislation is drawn up. Matt, you make a very good point. But I don't believe that this, so I understand what you're saying. I understand the misunderstanding. We obviously, we're on the same road, not the same lane. And I, as Dan said, expected you to come back with like the finished product, but do you really need the finished product for our recommendation? And that's what I'm kind of running through.
Gotcha.
But so at our meeting on the 16th, we would be, if we would do so today, we would make a recommendation to full council. Can we do that in general terms without the details? We can discuss that as a committee. And then the recommendation, if we were to go forward with that, would say we recommend that legislation be drawn up under these parameters, and these parameters and principles, whatever. And if the council says yes, then the legislation goes through as Matt's proposing, and then you could look at it on January.
Well,
Just clarification, the 9th would be the second Tuesday.
No, the 9th. Yes, on January 9th. So we would have council on 7th to get the legislation and refer it on the 9th.
Here might be my thought. We have kind of talked about this, and I think the 4 of us here all have a pretty good handle on the direction that this is going, regardless as if we've seen the language, the specific language of the ordinance or not. Perhaps what we could do to here today is we could talk about a few items that are, full bullet points that cover what that legislation is going to cover in your mind, and then that way we could make a recommendation to council next week. I don't know what the rest of the committee's thoughts would be on that.
I would like to get a recommendation to council.
Yeah, same. Yes.
Does that need to include the detailed maps and the specific language? No.
No. Okay.
Does that change the timeline for January?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it keeps us on the track of, if you do a recommendation today, I will submit a letter explaining the process, what's been done, and I will include the maps. And I will submit that, and that could go to council this next Tuesday. They will refer it to Planning Commission and Planning and Zoning. And then
And then the mailing could go out and you have the details.
and then on So the 9th will be Planning Commission and Planning and Zoning. And we would mail the notices out probably the 19th of December. So in that case, the 17th would be kind of the first time it's been heard, or it made its appearance at City Council. And then a couple days later, the mailing will go out, links to the website and information and stuff. And then it will be Planning Commission on the 9th. Council won't do anything with it on the 7th of January. Planning Commission on the 9th and Planning and Zoning on the 9th. And then if receiving one or two affirmative recommendations on the 9th, the first reading for the ordinance would be January 21st. 2 readings in February will go into effect at the end of March.
Yeah, because this can't have emergency.
Correct.
This is actually a change to the zoning.
And so that keeps with the timeline that I kind of left with. The ordinance will include the maps as you've seen. I've looked over the maps and I didn't really make any changes from where
Okay.
we left. The ordinance will create an overlay district. It has a kind of mission purpose statement of the district. Then it has the overlay district creates recreational/medical marijuana, cannabis dispensaries with a limit of 2, and they're a conditional use. So that means whether they're building a new building or they're moving into a strip mall, go before Planning Commission for conditional use, and it places a limit of 2 within the city of Findlay.
Now, is limit of 2 our recommendation? I don't know that we've actually,
That's come up before, I don't know.
we've never really discussed that or voted on that, or, I mean,
So, I mean, I think that would be a good item to kind of hash out here.
today. Yes, I agree.
Your guys', to me, to me, there's 2 items in the proposed ordinance that I'd like clarification on. The number of dispensaries permitted within the city of Findlay, and then the other is, do you allow more than one in each area? Those are really the only 2 criteria that I feel are kind of in limbo.
Yes, sir.
So I agree with your summary of what's of the items that need to be decided. I'm looking at our committee report from our last meeting, and we recommended the establishment of a cannabis overlay district, blah, 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 blah. And that committee report was accepted by full council. So they have given their tacit approval for the overlay district concept. So now today, what we're doing is recommending that legislation be presented at our next meeting, that if adopted, would establish the overlay district with these with these parameters or something to that effect. And then we would so we would state where the areas are, where the 4 areas are, talk about the limits as Matt said, and that would be the motion that we would, but we would say create the legislation, and then you would have that legislation for review as part of our kind of committee report type of thing.
Okay.
That works.
Mr. Hellman.
Does the conditional use consider or include a site plan review?
Yes, if it does, it tacitly does, but so if a business is moving into a strip mall and it's conditional use, we will look at the parking to make sure that the strip mall with the new use has the correct parking and things like that. Then secondly, if you're expanding a building by more than 10%, or you're building a new building, that requires site plan. So if that's the case, it'll have a conditional use and a site plan. Have two separate
Sure.
cases, and they would both be voted.
The reason I asked the question, my concern is, I guess, is that if it ends up in a high-traffic volume area, which I'm very confident that it probably would, but ingress and egress out of these places can be difficult. And, you know, if you've ever watched any of them, or you watch the traffic pattern even on Tiffin Avenue, it is difficult.
Sure.
People
So with the conditional use, the planning commission could require a traffic study if they thought it was appropriate. With a conditional use, they have decent amount of latitude.
Okay.
They could say the conditional use. I think one thing, if a dispensary was looking near the highway, I think that they could put the condition on is that they don't get a highway interstate sign, or something along those lines. To me, that's the benefit of the conditional use, is that they can look at each case and apply some conditions that they believe are reasonable.
With guardrails, so to speak.
A little bit of guardrails.
Okay.
But,
Thanks.
I mean, to Denny's point, the four areas that we are considering: Tiffin Avenue, I-75 at West Main Cross, I-75 at County Road 99, and I-75 at Trenton Avenue west of I-75. All four of these are high traffic areas. In your experience with the city of Findlay in a planning capacity, have you ever had a site plan review when a new retail establishment goes into an existing building in any of those sites?
No.
And would there be any reason that a new retail operator that happens to sell recreational marijuana would have any expectation that theirs would get a site plan review?
I thought you were going a different way with that. I would not expect a planning commission to require a traffic study if you're moving into an existing strip mall or an existing business. The last traffic study that planning commission required was for Cane's and the proposed Sheetz gas station, because they viewed that as two new traffic generators where there wasn't.
Well, they were also building on a new outlot that had previously been.
Correct.
And those aren't in that condition warranted a site plan and traffic study.
Yeah. I don't think, to your point, I don't think, unless they're building a new building, I don't see that there'll be many site plan issues. I don't, if there was a dollar store there before, I think planning commission will look at it and say the traffic will be similar.
And while I'm not familiar with every sign off of I-75, a retail establishment couldn't say, I want to put up a new sign without going through site plan. Or, I mean, that building something new obviously would go through the zoning process. Otherwise, they'd have to replace the face on an existing sign, and I would think that would cost a heavy premium. I'm trying to think of any buildings where they have a high-rise sign that they could do so. I don't know if Texas Roadhouse has one, and they'd have to replace something that's already there.
They could. There are some places that I know companies are looking at that do have high-rise signs that they would they would want to replace. There's a few businesses that are not in business right now at the highway interchanges where they could move in, potentially have a high-rise sign. part of the FAQ, I think, will be informative to residents because, Ohio residents are most familiar with Michigan. Ohio's rules are a lot different than Michigan. Michigan allows for billboards on the interstate. Ohio does not allow for
Right.
billboards on the interstate. Ohio does not allow pictures of cannabis leaves as part of their marketing campaign. Michigan does. Michigan does not necessarily limit the number of cannabis stores in the state of Michigan. Ohio does. So there are quite a few differences between Ohio and Michigan. And so part of that FAQ will just kind of be addressing some of the, their experience in Michigan is going to be a different experience in Ohio. And then we'll also, the FAQ will cover like what's an overlay district.
I'd like to see it cover the whole lottery thing. I don't even know that I understand that completely. Like, the state set up a lottery, and there's so many allowed to come in our district, and who are the selected ones? And I don't know. I have questions about all that. I don't completely
So,
understand that.
So one of the questions that I had is if we allow 2 or if we allow 5, but we have 7 applications, how do we choose per se? And discussing this with the cannabis retailers that have been contacted me, they feel that the process is already kind of their experiences with other communities and with the state of Ohio, that the state of Ohio in some ways kind of handles that, in that in my mind, it'll be the first, so they have a lottery for our region. The next step for them is to come in and get a form filled out that says, either, there's like 5 options. They're working with the municipality on the zoning, on the correct zoning. 2, the site has the correct zoning. So they have to then submit a specific site to the state. And in my mind, it's the first, I'm just using 2 as an example, the first 2 that get a specific site approved by the state are the first 2 that we would review.
Yeah.
And so, to me, that helps, it takes some of the weight off of us, in that it's the first ones that have gone through the permitting process fully for a site at the state, then will come to us for our review.
Yeah.
And if one is denied, then it's the 3rd one that gets.
And if I may. Yes, sir. Are those then, say it's number 1 and number 3 that gets selected by us, whoever that is?
Yeah.
Are they then the selected vendor that gets the sites, or do you wait until you get 4 or 5 and then you draw out of a hat, or how does that work? I don't get it.
And this is a good conversation. In my mind, it will be the first ones that have submitted the specific site in Findlay and had it approved by the state.
Okay.
I think that's in my mind, the most fair way, and that's the order that they will be
So
considered.
first come,
Yeah,
first
Mr.
served.
Restel.
Yes.
I totally agree, but I don't like us using the term selected. We're not selecting anything. Our process is simply a zoning question. Once this is established, this is the same as any other retail organization. We've said that we're in the process of saying we're going to establish zoning for this. They have to go through their state hoops, but eventually at some point in time, it's somebody coming in and saying, I have a retail business and I want to do it at this location that the state has approved. Here's my application. It's on city planning's conditional use calendar, and city planning would have to have some pretty serious. I don't know where they would say no to a retail place. They can't say no to they can't say no to a retail place because they don't like what they're selling. I don't think you should sell historic baseball cards, so I'm not going to let you go into this location at the strip mall. Or I don't think you're going to make it, and that's my reason for saying no to you. That's not an option for city planning. They have criteria, and anybody who gets through the state is going to be meeting the criteria. I don't want to say rubber stamp, but it's pretty darn close to it.
I agree with you 100%. In my mind, there's a 99% chance that the first two that get permitted through the state, one, they've selected a site that's in our overlay, and there's really no reason to turn them down.
What if we had 3 get approved on the same day by the state? They have a whole bunch of them, and then all of a sudden, on one day, they just issue 3 permits, and we only allow 2, for example. And then
I mean, I think that's I mean, all we're doing here is we're establishing the parameters by which that they can be in our community and exist in our community. I think that those decisions are out of our hands. I think right now we're just worried about how do we zone the darn things and get that done. Mr.
Well,
Russell?
to Dan's question, it's quite simple. At some point in time, they have to take a form and they have to go up to Eric. Is it your office and they have to turn in the form and say, I want to put this establishment at this place, and I'm sure the person in Eric's office takes the timestamp and stamps the thing, and the first you do them in the order that you get them.
Okay.
And the third one might be there, but if city planning. Then city planning needs to do them in the order that they get them, obviously.
Right.
To me, the other question that stands is if the state allows us 5, are we allowed to say? And I know we're allowed to say only 2. Are we? Do we know what the state's limit is for Do we know what the state's limit is, and are we at it, or are we just saying, hey, 2 is it for the time being?
I don't know. I don't know what the state's limit is for our region. I will say, what I've experienced is, for them to go for a person to go through the second step at the state, they have to have an agreement to purchase or an agreement to lease on a property. It's a lot of time and effort on their part, and so they look around. I think there's probably some that are like, well, we're not going to try for Findlay because we think it's only going to be 2, and we know these companies are ahead of us. We don't even have a site yet, so we're moving on. So, but I don't know what the state says.
I mean,
Mr. Hellman.
just to follow up a little bit for clarification on my part, you used the term region. How big is a region? Just out of curiosity.
I know Fostoria is in our region. They first had started off the lottery saying you get a Hancock County or a Findlay. The problem is people were winning lotteries, and the city had not or will not permit them yet. And so what they then did is they changed it to be a region, so there would be multiple opportunities for that. That's my understanding of how that process.
And it could be multiple counties
Yes.
in one region.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, that helps a little bit.
I guess we haven't really fleshed that out as a group. What is this committee? What would be this committee's thought in terms of a cap or a number, or if we did put a number on that?
I guess it would
Well-
depend upon how big the region is.
Well, we're just
Our region is
Our-
really simple, City of Findlay.
Yeah, City of Findlay, yeah, right. So, I mean, I've heard in the past 2 or 3. I guess my preference would be 2, because you can add, but you can't take away. So I would start with a lower number, and then we can always, if it's going okay, and somebody comes to us and requests a 3rd, we could always change that, I suppose, but go through council and whatever. But so I would stay with a smaller number, and I guess I'm okay with 2. But
Mr. Russell?
I think that's you're right. You can always add. Subtracting is difficult. and I'll go back to Mr. Niemeyer's comments from November, which honestly really rung true with me, that this is going to be a retail establishment, and once established, you might not like the product, but it's not that big of a deal. It's going to be a retail place that there's plenty of retail places in this town that you don't know what they're selling because you never visited them, and this is going to be similar. And so, but I concur that we should do two. I personally don't care if there's two in the same district, or if, which I know we talked about, whether it's one per district or just two in the city. I think just two in the city wherever, and let the market decide where the vendor decides where they want to be. And
I agree with that.
I would agree with the number, the limit of 2 as well.
Start out with
And I agree with 2, and I don't feel that strongly about the number, if there were 2 in one sector, especially, and there is a state law, part of the state does not permit them within 1,000 feet of each other. So there is that.
Okay, here's state law.
That's
Okay.
already built into the process.
I had a downtown businessman that recommended we put them all in one place. But I agree with Grant that just let the market dictate that and let them decide, so.
Mr. Russell?
so I want to think out loud about a motion. That we're going to recommend the creation of legislation,
Oh, he's right.
the creation of legislation that, if approved, would establish a cannabis overlay district in currently zoned C2 areas for properties in the following C2 areas, and then we list the 4. And it limits the number of establishments to 2 within the city of Findlay. So it's really the recommendation from last month with the little language that says, "Hey, go create the ordinance that legislation if adopted," and then it adds the limit. And if people are thinking that that's that summarizes what we're doing, I'll write it out and then read it.
So there's,
I would be in agreement with that.
so there's 4 parts. It's the create the ordinance, overlay district, C2, the 4 areas listed, and then 2 within the city. So there's actually 5 points.
And I have one other, what I was planning on was, while we're passing this, was to remove the moratorium at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. On the manufacturing, on the industrial, we're not doing anything with that, really.
We haven't had conversation. We could do that at the same time, and that, if we were to do that, my recommendation would be growing, processing cannabis, manufacturing of cannabis products is a conditional use in the I-1 district. And in my mind, it could be as simple as that.
In this same recommendation to council?
Yeah,
Okay, let them finish here, and then we'll.
we can. So, to me, and then I would debate if it's a grow facility, my only, I debate whether to put it in the ordinance or not, but if I was a planning commission member, my only real concern about any of these would be smell. And then if it's a grow facility, I probably would prefer the walls to be kind of a solid.
Yeah, light control.
And then the roofs can be, in my mind, the roofs can be clear if they want to try to, but, so those are just my thoughts.
Yeah.
And then some assurances about like, the processing doesn't create a strong smell that can be noticed by the neighbors.
Yeah.
And that would be no retail in the industrial part.
Correct. And that's built into the I-1 district.
All right, thanks.
It's a long one.
He's getting it correct. And thorough.
Repeal the existing moratorium on retail establishments?
Retail and medicinal marijuana dispensaries.
Recreational.
Oh, who wants to spell dispensary for me? D-I-S-P-E-N.
S-A-R-Y.
Red line is under it and it's spelled wrong.
So we recommend the creation of legislation that, if adopted, would create a cannabis overlay district for currently zoned C2 properties in the following areas: Tiffin Avenue, I-75 at County Road 99, I-75 at West Main Cross Street, I-75 at Trenton Avenue west of I-75, and would limit the number of retail establishments to 2, and would repeal the existing moratorium on all retail establishments.
Okay. So if we could, before we vote on that.
When all retail, on all retail establishments, okay, I've got to make sure I've got this moratorium right, and would repeal the existing moratorium. I got to say it's cannabis things, because otherwise I'm repealing the moratorium on gaming stores. So would repeal the existing cannabis moratorium.
I mean, our current, the current cannabis, I think that's.
The existing
Recreational and medicinal moratorium of cannabis products or sale of
cannabis
products.
moratorium on all retail establishments, or for retail establishments. Yeah.
when we talk about, let Dan prove it. When we talk about Tiffin Avenue, where Tiffin Avenue goes from, what, Main Street, North Main?
It'll be defined on the maps. It's not the whole, right? Yeah, the area will be defined on the overlay map.
The maps that we reviewed, so and we looked at that and we had a discussion, and it's essentially, it's kind of, the beginning of the overlay district is kind of the mall area east to
Oh.
236, roughly.
Okay, so it's not coming down to, what,
It's not near Main Street.
yeah.
And it's not what I call Old Tiffin Avenue.
Yeah.
Which is Taco Bell, Dietz's.
So it isn't extending all the way into town, downtown.
I don't know that those are C2s that are outside of the. I don't believe that the old, what you called Old Tiffin Avenue is C2 outside of the existing state mandated buffers.
I think there's a little
There-
bit there, but yeah.
But it's the when we say Tiffin Avenue, yeah, it's what we had talked about in the past.
So those areas that Grant described allude to the maps that would be, the general areas, and the maps are the specific that would be adopted with the ordinance.
All right.
I don't recall how the language is for the hospital overlay, and doesn't University of Findlay have an overlay? But do they actually list parcel numbers, or do you just list boundaries?
So we will be amending the zoning ordinance, both the language and the map. So the amending of the map will be a colored line that,
Okay.
so there'll be a new color, I haven't decided what color it is. But
Well, obviously, green would be the.
green or tie-dye if we have.
Purple, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Some purple psychedelic.
That would be added to.
Okay, and so then and then that one goes parcel by parcel.
Yes.
Okay.
It will follow, it's in GIS, so the maps that we approved, I'm essentially gonna turn that layer on. You good?
Yeah, so
Hang on though. Okay, to this, before we vote on this, this is, I think, this is good. We captured everything we talked about.
Yet?
Pardon me?
I was going to say, do we have a second on the motion yet?
I don't think we have a motion yet, do we? I want to talk about this industrial, whether this motion needs to include anything about the growing in the industrial zones. Do we want to, does it even need to be addressed, or we're just, does that
doesn't-
need to be part of our recommendation?
Doesn't need to
council?
be addressed because you can't put industrial in a C2, and this is only C2.
No, I mean, if cannabis companies wanted to come in and put growing facilities in an industrial area, do we,
I'll take all the tax revenue we can get.
that's kind of the way I feel too. I'm okay, so if we had 50 cannabis growers come in, we're okay with that.
Hancock Wood would be ecstatic.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that needs to be regulated. So,
The growing part?
the growing part.
To Dan's comment, yes, I think you could also vote on that today. Because, I mean, repealing the moratorium is in a different section of the code than, so we're changing multiple little sections of the code. And
Do we have a moratorium on the industrial right now?
we don't, but we don't list it as we don't list it as a permitted use. So I think.
Do we restrict it as a permitted use?
If someone came to me today and said, do you allow for retail or for growing or processing or manufacturing of cannabis products, I would tell them it's not listed as a permitted use.
How about if somebody came to you and said, do you allow for industrial greenhouses?
I would probably say it's.
How about if you said just a greenhouse in an I-1?
I'd have to look at what the code says. So I don't recall if we do allow greenhouses.
Well, maybe we put in our recommendation that we allow the, manufacturing and processing of cannabis in industrial, why don't we just,
I would recommend for clarity
okay,
that we do just under
You wanna get,
cannabis products.
you're doing a good job.
And it's very clear, and it's clear to manufacturers and everything. Yes, Findlay does allow this. It's not ambiguous.
In an industrial district.
In I-1, yes.
Here's the purist in me coming out. Why would we specifically say we allow this industry when we don't specifically say we would allow every industry under the sun that we can think of? Why would a facility that grows plants, be it corn, poinsettias, or marijuana, be any different? And you could just say because it is. I mean, and that's a valid argument.
I would say because this is new and there's some stigma with it and concern, like, uh-oh, you said the magic words.
Yeah.
You know, but to your point, in light industrial, when it's in a 100,000 square foot metal box, I honestly don't care what happens in that metal box.
Yeah, I don't either.
Whether, as long as it doesn't smell,
Mm-hmm.
have crazy traffic issues or whatever happens in that metal box, whether it's manufacturing basketballs or manufacturing something else, it doesn't matter. But I think for clarity's sake, it would be beneficial to staff and for everyone's understanding that we do add the processing of cannabis products.
As a permitted use?
I would say conditional
In an I-1
in I-1.
or only.
Do you have code there to say what your other I-1 conditional uses are?
We'll get Jacob on the task here once we get this connected.
So generally in zoning, everything's permitted unless it's not permitted? Or is it the things that are permitted have to be specifically stated in general senses?
In general senses, if it's not listed, it is not permitted in the code. That's where some of the definitions are, you know, a lot of the industrial definitions are pretty open. And one could argue very much so that they fit within
Similar.
those definitions.
Yeah, so let's hear the code. Are you guys okay with it? I mean, do you think?
I mean,
I guess I hadn't anticipated venturing into the manufacturing and industrial part of that. And including it in this thing, in this part, I don't know, just didn't seem right. But I'm flexible, to be honest.
I mean, isn't that, are they gonna they're picking that based on where they can get the cheapest power, aren't they? I mean, if that truly is,
If lighting is the big issue, probably so. Lighting and heat.
the Earl, I just saw your jacket. Because that's a big grow facility down at Wapak in the southwest corner of 33 and 75. I'm almost sure of it.
Is it lit?
Oh my gosh! From
you can see it from Lima.
If I've flown over it
Yeah.
before at night, and you can see it from Indianapolis. I mean, it is so bright in the middle of dark.
Yeah.
I've seen it.
Okay, I have so I-1 permitted uses: industrial manufacturing, light manufacturing, wholesale trade, transportation and warehousing, machining, welding, major automotive repair, semi-truck repair, research and development laboratories, self-storage, trade industrial schools, public safety facilities, kennels, indoor and outdoor, towing operations, a weird one. Production and storage of medical or compressed gas, RV sales and services, contractor storage and equipment, bulk sales storage of or topsoil and mulches, and then conditional uses, sales area or showroom for products manufactured on site, sale area not to exceed 40% of the primary structure, adult entertainment uses, outdoor drive-in movie theaters, any additional less intensive non-objectionable use, which are subject to planning commission review, electric vehicle charging station, refuse transfer station, and recycling centers. So if my proposal would be to add a item G to conditional uses that says and I'd look at other communities. This is a lot of communities have added this, but it's manufacturing, growing, processing of cannabis products.
In I-1 light industrial.
In I-1 light industrial as a conditional use, which planning commission has to review and approve the conditional use.
Is the growing of a poinsettia plant a manufacturing activity?
Probably an agricultural piece.
Because as you were reading through that, I was simply listening for, do we allow something to be grown there?
Sure.
And so the way we would do this with a conditional use is say, hey, you're good to go. The only way I heard growing would be is saying that that's less intensive.
Yeah.
And you'd kind of run it under that. And if that's where you think that would go, I just want to make sure we're not saying, okay, conditional use on marijuana, but don't you dare grow poinsettia.
Sure. Yeah, if a poinsettia grower came to us and said, hey, we want to build 100,000 square feet facility to grow and process poinsettias, I think we would go to our trusty conditional use part D, any additional less intensive non-objectionable use. That's where we would.
So in other words, that's why we would need to add a section G, because this is not necessarily less objectionable in terms of what we're talking.
No, I mean, I am with Grant in that growing poinsettias and growing cannabis are the same thing
Understood.
in my mind.
I mean, I agree. I'm just.
And if you
Should we just broaden it to any agricultural, plant or,
But the reason we're specifically saying it is because it is, I'm arguing against my purist argument or self on this, but the reason you're saying it is because it is a unique industry at this point in time, and you're specifically telling the industry what the city's position is on it,
Correct.
so that there's no ambiguity.
Yeah.
Which the reason we don't have big greenhouses here anymore is because the energy costs aren't, or for whatever reason. So it's not like I would expect to see growers, with the addition of this language, itching to get in.
And there, just to this point, marijuana sold in Ohio has to be cultivated in Ohio. And that's because then you're transporting
Because you can't
transport
over.
a federal illegal item across state borders. So.
What is that, Marbury versus Nose?
So just a point in that there will be people, they've been growing for the medical community in Ohio, but I would expect, there will be growing facilities in Ohio because they have to be.
Well, they have to be here already. Or are
Yeah.
they just being supplied out of the medical grow facilities?
And that's, I'm sure some have been added already for the recreational, and maybe we won't see any more. But just to note, I just wanted to add that point, that it's not unreasonable to think that there will be grow facilities in Ohio. It's not just all being shipped in from California or Michigan, because that's illegal.
Is there a minimum building size in I-1?
No.
Okay. And Dan said, added the language for this, and add the manufacturing, growing, and processing of cannabis products as a conditional use in I-1 districts.
Is that the wording?
I'm good with that.
I think so, yeah.
So here is my motion, that we recommend the creation of legislation that, if adopted, would create a cannabis overlay district for currently zoned C2 properties in the following areas: Tiffin Avenue, I-75 and County Road 99, I-75 at West Main Cross, I-75 and Trenton Avenue west of I-75, and would limit the number of retail establishments and I'm going to add something, selling cannabis products to 2. And would repeal existing cannabis, the existing cannabis moratorium for retail establishments. And would add the manufacturing, growing, and processing of cannabis products as a conditional use in I-1 districts.
Second. Discussion.
I'm good.
On the,
Go ahead.
the limiting it to 2, do we need to say, maybe not, it's just 2 anywhere, really, I guess it's no, okay.
Yeah, because we just say 2, we haven't told them that it has to be per district or whatever. It's just 2 within those limits.
All those in, so we have a first, or a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by
We
saying
need that door open, ma'am. Thank you.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it.
And so we'll have written legislation and the maps
Yes, I'm going to,
in the packet for the next meeting.
yes, I'm
Okay.
going to go talk with Denise, let her
Let-
know it's coming,
Thank you.
give her some Dietz's chocolate for the
You
inconvenience.
better.
And that will be in your packet, that you will receive Friday, and it'll be there Tuesday.
Okay.
And then it'll be on planning and zoning in January. And then we'll go from there. If it's referred on, then we'll have our 3 readings. And in my mind, that timeframe, after the 30 days, at the end of February, it'd probably be active at the beginning of April or end of March, depending on the 30 days.
Yeah. And the legislation is going to be not an emergency.
No,
Okay.
no.
all right.
As long as I've been here, we've never done rezonings or any kind of zoning update on emergency
Okay.
basis. And there may be some state law that kind of frowns or
Yeah.
that,
all right.
but just from a standpoint, we just want everyone's.
Yeah.
This isn't a big issue. We want feedback.
Yeah.
From your conversations with the retail establishments that have contacted you, would you expect that they are going to be in front of the state of Ohio, prior to April? Or do they have to wait until April and then they go, or?
I expect them to submit applications to the state any day.
Now that they know where they think this is going?
I've had conversations with them, and they said, Matt, are you willing to check the checkbox that says we're working with the city to achieve the correct zoning? And I said, yes. You're in my office. We're talking about the overlay district. You're talking about potential places and what the process is. So we're talking about zoning. So I said, yes, I would check that box.
When you send out your contact to, this is going to be a big mailing, because you got to do the affected properties and then that limit around it.
We calculate it's 600, which was less than I thought.
For the properties surrounding the properties is 600?
Yeah, all properties at 600.
Wow.
I was actually shocked.
And-
I was thinking like 1,500.
And are we're directing them to the city's website, correct? Not
Yes.
Hancock Regional Planning's.
The city's website, we're going to have the FAQ up. And then they'll also be able to call our office.
Would you be so kind as to send me the FAQs before they're published?
I would love
Just for another set of eyes?
I
Because
would.
I'm retired and this is what I do for fun now.
I know. I will share in the fun. I won't hold it
Or
all to
send
myself.
send the FAQs just to the whole committee.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll use that as a jumping off spot for item number 3 on the agenda. We discussed at the tail end of last meeting of this body that we would discuss on-site parking requirements for new residential developments. So we will do that now.
Okay. So my takeaway was at this meeting, you wanted a summary of what Findlay requires. And Grant and I, we've talked about this a little bit off and on over the last year, just kind of on a side note, and I kind of saw this coming. So I did have our intern, Jacob Clemens, this summer, start creating this sheet. And so what this does, it kind of summarizes what Findlay requires, and it looks at about 15 other communities and what they require. The biggest and most interesting of all these communities is our friends to the north, Bowling Green, in which they have done what we are just possibly discussing, or the reason I think Grant brought it up was flexibility, and they've gone down that path, and they've removed parking standards from their zoning code. So
Completely.
Bowling
Completely.
Green has?
Bowling Green has, yes.
They're the third column, fourth column.
Yeah.
So
They're-
when Jacob told me that, I'm like, Jacob Clemens. When our intern told us that, I think you're wrong. Please call them. And he did call them and confirm they had removed them. And I've heard it from other sources. What I would like to do. What's that?
Bowling Green has one significant difference in that they have a large public university there, and
Sure.
and a little surprised, but
So what I don't know is what I haven't done yet. What I'd like to do is I'd like to contact them. I want to set up a meeting with them and just go, what was the process? Why did you do it? When did it go into effect? Has it been positive? Has it been negative?
I'd love to be a part of that one too, because I'm retired and I really don't have a lot of things to
Hey,
do.
I am willing to, like I said, I'm willing to share the planning fun. I know it's a hoot and a holler, so. No, I'd love to have, Grant will road trip up there and have a lunch with their planning director and hear all about it.
Sounds good.
I guess, so many of them are, you look at, offices and restaurants and those fast food. I mean, that's really their business to manage.
Agreed, 100%.
You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, so I guess it impacts the city, and then if they mismanage it, and then we have all this overflow into public streets, that's where it becomes our problem, I guess.
Understand that when Brian and I talked about it in my conversations with Matt, have always been focused on residential.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll admit I am influenced by readings and study from a UCLA professor named Donald Shoup, S-H-O-U-P. And he has a kind of a fanatical following. But to summarize his years of work into one quick sentence, it's that we don't sacrifice housing for people because of housing for cars. And so he doesn't want to have us he doesn't want to limit the ability to create housing because of the inability to house the cars for that housing on the property. And so that's what it sounds like Bowling Green did. And my push for this, or my interest in this, is affordable housing and just some of the things that I've seen come through. And housing is more expensive when you have a requirement on it to also house cars. And there's a couple of specific examples that I can think of. And I think the one that's most poignant to me is there's two lots on West Lincoln that have these two houses just crammed right next to each other. And it looks like it was a lot split a gajillion years ago, and they're really thin. And somebody came in and said, hey, I want to combine these two lots, take the houses down, put in a triplex. But the contortions he had to do in order to get the parking made the proposal silly. I mean, it didn't fit the neighborhood, and it was just cocky. I mean, I don't know if you remember this one, but he had to turn the building on its side and sideways on the lot, and it could have been solved by saying, okay, we'll go easy, we'll restrict or go less on the parking requirements, because you builder probably know what parking you need to have in order to attract tenants. And what's wrong with parking on the street type of thing, where people, after you create the parking lot, people park anyway type of thing. And that was just like a specific example. So while I appreciate the fact that the other ones are there, I'm less interested in how much parking is required for Kroger than I am for how much parking is required for a triplex. And that's where I focus.
I will say, to Dan's point, and I agree with Dan in that Walmart knows better what parking they need, or any company knows what they need parking-wise, retail-wise. And we have migrated that idea into our code, in that for retail, office, et cetera, our requirements are low. I think for Target, or
Who?
Target or Walmart or any other big box store, our requirement is around 300 spots. And they come in and say, we need 415, or if it's office, so and to your point, if it's a problem for their customers, they'll try to fix it. If it's a problem for our streets, that's where we have an issue. So,
I got a
and
question.
I'm interested in exploring this idea for residential. I think at the very least, I'm thinking of the McPherson one, where our code doesn't look at the number of bedrooms. And to me, whatever we do, whatever ideas we go at, that's one that I think we should change, or we need to look at that also, as apartments, because a 4-bedroom apartment has the same parking requirements as a 1-bedroom apartment, and it's not reasonable to think that those two are the same. So,
Mr. Hellman.
Yeah, I appreciate all the work that you've done in figuring this out for other cities and the various uses. Have you looked at, we always hold ourselves up to Upper Arlington, Delaware, Dublin, Worthington, Hilliard, those kinds of places. Now granted, they're part of the Columbus metropolitan area down there, but if those are cities that we strive to be like or admire.
Well, Dublin's actually on here. Second one from the right.
You're right.
yeah,
Sorry
we
about that. Got it.
very aware of that. I always look to Worcester. I believe Worcester to me is a similar animal as us. Dublin and Hilliard, those are, we strive there. But so I always, when we're looking at other communities, I always try to grab a little of both. And I think we've done that here. I always look to Bowling Green. They're kind of similar to us. University, different. But yes, we try to we don't just want suburbs. We want small cities that are geographically isolated like us,
Yeah,
et cetera.
self-contained, yeah. I'll take another look at it, but
I will email this to you. I just got new bifocals, and so I'm feeling that I can read small things, but this is pretty small type.
I'm good.
I can handle it.
Does anybody do things like having different parking standards for, I'll say the core city, and I'm thinking like if you took we actually, I know we do this. We don't have parking requirements in the downtown business hub, but extend that to residential, to say that the older part of town, and I'll just say the areas surrounding downtown, both to the west near the grocery store and south, like north of 6th Street, where we're in these grid street patterns type of thing, and have a different requirement there where we're probably C2, C3 based on lot size versus maybe a C2 area or the residential around, I'll just say University of Findlay, for example, or north of Trenton Avenue, and that we have. Is that a planning idea that anybody would do, or is that just so silly to you'd never consider it?
No, I mean, I don't. I think trying to think. I'm thinking of some of the bigger cities that have like 25, 30 different zoning, almost 25 or 30 different residential zoning categories.
And that gets so complex.
Yeah, but to me, it does seem like a natural idea in that neighborhoods are different, and there's different densities, and it might make sense for some areas but not others. So I think it's a good idea to explore.
And that was where the thought was, that neighborhoods are different, and neighborhoods have different characteristics and feelings, or you just get a different need. Actually, University of Findlay is probably a better example, where you see more need for dense housing for 8 to 9 months versus other areas, and probably less. I don't know if it's less cars per bedroom or not. I would think that there would be probably more people walking in the university area than others. I don't know if that's the case. So are we digesting this and talking with other citizens, and then coming back and at our next meeting and going forth?
I think so. I think my to-do list, my number one priority is to have us go talk with Bowling Green and understand their experience with it so far and why they did it. And then and anything else we can kind of research up and then have some more discussion, report back on why they did it, and any other, where, that might lead us to me to provide some different information. And to me, it's just, we'll keep exploring this over the next couple meetings. I think we'll start honing in on.
Does Bowling Green allow ADUs or accessory dwelling units? Do you know?
Don't know. We can
Okay.
find that out. That's another big trend, kind of nationwide, that allowing mother-in-law suites,
Yeah.
separate mother-in-law suites, or a tiny home on your single-family property lot.
I know that where my son lives, they try to do that blanket throughout the whole city, and they about hung the planners by their thumbs. There was so much pushback,
Yeah.
and I thought it was an interesting idea, but a poor implementation for a variety of reasons. But you're right. You start, and especially anything you see from coming out from the Realtors Association or on Common Ground magazine is talking ADUs all the time anymore.
Yeah.
San Diego allowed that. They changed theirs a couple of years ago. My daughter had a house out there, and that's how they, took care of their homeless population, or just tried to lower rental pricing, basically.
Sure.
Just kind of. So anyway.
My initial was like, we'll let others play with that idea for a while,
Yeah.
and we'll jump on in another 5 or 10 years when, when we see the fallout from it. Yeah. No, but that is a current topic, that
Yeah.
a way to increase the housing stock without having to put a bunch of more infrastructure in.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I will make the motion that we continue discussions on on-site parking requirements for new residential developments, and we will discuss that at our next few meetings.
I'll second that.
Brilliant.
Good.
We have a motion and a second. Any
Yeah,
discussion?
Can I discuss that?
Yeah.
So are we limiting it to just residential? I mean, are we going to look at the whole parking for commercial and industrial? Or are we limiting this to just residential? Personally, I'd rather see it more broad and not just residential. So,
I agree with that.
Except for Matt previously stated that our parking requirements for retail are so low that they don't hinder retail development, and that if we have too big of an ocean to boil here, we're never going to make progress on the area that I think that I'm personally
Yeah.
bringing this for. That'd be my counter to that. Do you think looking at our commercial parking is going to have much of a change?
No, I don't think we'll make many changes. There is, however, a list of like 40 to 60 uses that we call out specifically still. So,
Could we limit? So are you
So-
talking about simplification?
yeah, so in 2012, previous director Bill Homka, we went to, it used to be like 7 pages. And you're like, okay, you manufacture red bicycles, 3 spots per bicycle, just insane.
yeah.
And then we just said, office, for every 325 square feet, 1 spot. So we have simplified it enough. I would like to review that kind of 60 item list that we still have. But I think there might be some tweaks in there that we.
All right. I'm all for simplifying if we want to expand this into, commercial and industrial.
Go ahead and do it.
And we can always split off residential from commercial if the one bogs down the other,
Sure.
Yeah.
regardless of which
Yeah,
direction that
sure.
is.
Okay. Yeah.
So we have a motion and a second.
And say the motion again.
Continue discussion on on-site parking requirements for new residential developments.
Remove the new residential and
Yeah.
developments, if you will, and get a second from your seconder.
Okay.
What was the amendment?
Read your new now.
Continue
Oh, he
discussion
did.
on on-site parking requirements.
He had a motion
Yeah.
and a second, and now we're asking him to amend his motion.
Dennis, you motioned the first.
Yeah, but
Seconded it.
seconded it.
Second,
But
I'm
I guess
sorry.
I don't understand the amendment. You're doing what?
Well, we just had a discussion about including commercial property, and his motion says residential only. And so I'm trying to have the motion actually reflect what the committee wants to do. But he made the motion, you made the second, and now we're changing the motion. So it requires your second.
To include commercial, or to include.
Just, we're just saying continue discussion on on-site parking requirements.
Fine.
Okay.
It's not limiting to
Right.
just residential, it's just open. Yeah.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries.
Move to adjourn.
Second. We will adjourn.
Done.
The time is 1:20.
Accomplished a lot.